Tunnel footage that changed everything. Nobody expected the real explosion to happen after the final buzzer. Not on the court, not in front of the referees, not under the bright lights of national television. It happened in the tunnel. One grainy piece of footage surfaced just hours after Game 3. And suddenly, the entire NBA world stopped talking about box scores, shooting percentages, and playoff adjustment. Instead, everyone was asking the same question. What exactly happened between Victor Wembanyama and Jalen Brunson? At first glance, it looked like just another heated playoff exchange. Two competitors, a few words, a little frustration, nothing unusual. But then people watched it again and again. The body language, the expressions, the intensity. The fact that multiple people had to step between them. This wasn't two players casually walking back to the locker room. This was months of pressure, expectations, physical battles, and growing resentment finally boiling over. Because here's what most people don't understand. This series stopped being just basketball a long time ago. On one side stood Victor Wembanyama, the generational phenomenon, the 7'4" unicorn carrying the future of an entire franchise on his shoulders. The player many believe could become the face of the NBA for the next decade. On the other side stood Jalen Brunson, the underestimated warrior who built his reputation through toughness, leadership, and an unwillingness to fear anybody standing across from him. Every possession between them had become personal. Every drive to the basket carried a message. Every missed whistle fueled another layer of frustration. And after Game 3, there was no hiding it anymore. What was caught in that tunnel wasn't the beginning of this story. It was the moment the entire world finally noticed what had been building beneath the surface all along. Tonight, we're breaking down every angle of this drama. The missed calls, the growing rivalry, the hidden tension nobody talked about, and why what happened after Game 3 may completely change the rest of this playoff series. Because if you think this story ends with one viral video, you haven't been paying attention. Before we jump in, let me know where you're watching from tonight. Drop your city, state, or country in the comments below. And here's a quick one. If you think this was simply playoff emotion, comment 1. If you believe something much deeper is going on between Brunson and Wemby, comment 2. If you're new here and love intense NBA stories, breaking news, and the drama behind the game, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Trust me, what happens next might be the most unforgettable chapter of this entire postseason. Game 3 was never just another playoff game. From the opening tip, Game 3 felt different. This was not a normal playoff game where both teams slowly tested each other, adjusted to the rhythm, and waited for the fourth quarter to decide who wanted it more. No, this game had tension from the first possession. Every screen was harder. Every drive carried more contact. Every loose ball looked like a fight for survival. Players were hitting the floor, getting up slowly, staring at officials, staring at each other, and you could feel that something was building long before the tunnel footage ever appeared. The Knicks came in with pressure on their backs. New York does not wait patiently. That city demands urgency. Every playoff loss feels like history repeating itself, and Jalen Brunson understands that better than anyone. He knows he is not just playing for a team. He is carrying the belief of an entire fan base that has been desperate for a real championship run. But the Spurs were not acting like a young team happy to be there. They were playing like a group that believed their future had already arrived. And at the center of that belief was Victor Wembanyama. Every time Brunson turned the corner, Wemby was waiting. Every time Brunson tried to create space, those impossible arms closed the window. Every shot near the rim became a decision. Every decision became a risk. That is what makes Wembanyama so dangerous. He does not just block shots. He changes thoughts. He makes elite players hesitate for half a second, and in playoff basketball, half a second can destroy an entire possession. For Brunson, that is personal. He has spent his whole career proving that size does not define dominance. He has beaten bigger guards, stronger defenders, louder arenas, and every doubt placed in front of him. So when Wemby stood between him and the paint again and again, Brunson did not back away. He attacked harder, and that is where the temperature changed. Because Wemby was not backing down either. The more Brunson challenged him, the more Wembanyama seemed to embrace it. The matchup became a game within the game. Knicks versus Spurs was the headline, but Brunson versus Wemby became the heartbeat. By the fourth quarter, the tension was no longer hidden. You could see it in the way Brunson reacted after contact. You could see it in the way Wemby held his ground. You could see teammates watching a little closer, coaches complaining a little louder, and officials trying to control a game that was slowly slipping into something more emotional. Then came the moment everyone would talk about later. A drive, contact, no whistle. Brunson clearly believed something should have been called. Wemby clearly believed he had played it clean. The officials let play continue, but the frustration did not disappear. It stayed. It followed them through the final minutes. It followed them after the buzzer, and eventually, it followed them into the tunnel. That is why Game 3 mattered. The viral footage was not a random incident. It was the result of 48 minutes of physical basketball, 3 games of building pressure, and 2 proud competitors refusing to give even 1 inch. By the time they left the court, the scoreboard was no longer the only story. The real story had just started. The giant and the guard who would not move. What makes this matchup so dangerous is not just the size difference, it is the pride difference. Victor Wembanyama and Jalen Brunson represent 2 completely different basketball stories colliding at full speed. Wemby entered the league as the future. A once-in-a-generation talent, a player so tall, so skilled, and so unusual that people started comparing him to legends before it. Even played a full NBA season. Every block, every 3, every impossible defensive recovery became proof that the hype might actually be real. Brunson came from the opposite road. He was not treated like a chosen one. He was not handed the keys to a franchise on draft night. He had to earn trust, possession by possession, series by series, city by city, and by the time he became the face of the Knicks, he had already built the one thing no defender can measure: belief. That is why Wemby can bother him, but he cannot scare him. Brunson has made a career out of attacking giants. He gets low, uses his strength, changes pace, invites contact, and turns disadvantages into weapons. Most guards see Wembanyama near the rim and immediately look for another option. Brunson sees him and keeps coming, but Wemby is different from every big man Brunson has solved before. He does not need to jump early. He does not need to overreact. He can give up a step, recover late, and still erase the shot. His length changes the geometry of the floor. Angles that normally belong to Brunson suddenly disappear. Floaters that usually feel safe become dangerous. Layups that usually look open are not open anymore. That kind of defense can frustrate even the calmest scorer. And Brunson is not built to accept frustration quietly, so every possession became a test. Could Brunson force his way into the paint? Could Wemby stay disciplined? Could the officials tell the difference between legal physicality and missed contact? Could either star walk away without taking it personally? By game 3, the answer was obvious. No. This had become personal. Not hateful, not dirty, but personal in the way only elite competition can become personal. When 2 great players keep meeting at the same point on the floor again and again, someone eventually feels disrespected. Brunson felt he was being hit without getting the whistle. Wemby felt he was defending without getting respect. That is a dangerous combination, because when both players believe they are right, neither one is going to step back, and that is exactly why the tunnel moment felt so explosive. It was not just about one play. It was about identity. For Brunson, backing down would mean betraying everything that made him a star. For Wembanyama, backing down would mean allowing someone to challenge his rise without response. So when the game ended, the emotion did not end with it. The rivalry had already crossed from strategy into psychology. And once that happens in a playoff series, every possession afterward carries a little more weight, a little more tension, and a little more danger. The missed whistle that lit the fuse. The play looked simple. Brunson drove. Wembanyama stepped up. There was contact, then silent. No whistle. For Brunson, that silence said everything. He believed he had been hit. Wemby believed he had defended cleanly, and the officials let the game continue. That one moment became the spark, because this was not just about one call. Brunson had been battling Wemby's length all series. Every drive felt harder. Every finish near the rim came with pressure. Every missed whistle added more frustration. But Wembanyama had his own side. From his view, he was staying disciplined, protecting the paint, and being punished by perception simply because his size makes every contest look unusual. That is what made the play so explosive. Both players believed they were right. Brunson felt unprotected. Wemby felt disrespected. And when 2 proud competitors carry that emotion into the final buzzer, the game does not really end. It follows them into the tunnel, into the cameras, and into the biggest storyline of the series. What really happened in the tunnel? The final buzzer should have ended it, but it didn't. As players moved off the court, the tension between Brunson and Wembanyama followed them into the tunnel. This was the space where the lights were lower, the noise was different, and emotions were no longer protected by the rhythm of the game. Then, the footage surfaced. Brunson and Wemby were close. Words were exchanged. Neither looked ready to walk away. Within seconds, people from both sides stepped in, trying to keep the moment from becoming bigger than it already was. And that detail mattered, because when multiple people rush in, it tells you this was not casual trash talk. This was serious playoff emotion spilling into a private space that suddenly became public. For Brunson, the frustration from the missed calls was still fresh. For Wembanyama, the challenge to his defense and pride was just as real. Neither player wanted to look weak. Neither wanted to give the other the final word. That is how a basketball game turns into a national storyline. The tunnel became the symbol of everything this series had become: pressure, pride, contact, respect, and 2 stars refusing to bend. And now, Everyone is watching what happens next, why this was always coming. This confrontation did not appear out of nowhere. It was built possession by possession. The Spurs are playing with the confidence of a team that believes its future has arrived early. Wembanyama is not just a young star anymore. He is becoming the center of everything San Antonio believes it can become. That brings pressure. Every great play makes the expectations louder. Every win makes the future feel closer. And every challenge from a player like Brunson becomes a test of whether Wemby is ready for the emotional weight of playoff basketball. But the Knicks carry a different kind of burden. New York does not treat playoff basketball like entertainment, it treats it like identity. Brunson is not just the best player on the team. He is the face of the hope that this franchise can finally break through. So, when Brunson attacks Wemby, he is not only trying to score, he is trying to prove that New York will not be intimidated. And when Wemby meets him at the rim, he is not only protecting the basket, he is proving that the Spurs are no longer waiting for tomorrow. That is why this matchup became so personal. It was pride against pride, future against pressure, size against stubbornness. And in a series where every possession feels like a statement, something was eventually going to break. Game 3 was simply the moment it finally happened. The NBA world reacts. Once the footage spread, the entire conversation changed instantly. Fans were no longer only debating Game 3, they were debating respect, toughness, officiating, and who had the right to be angry. Knicks fans looked at Brunson and saw a leader who had been attacking the paint all night, absorbing contact, and fighting through one of the most difficult defensive matchups in basketball. To them, his frustration made perfect sense. They believed he was not asking for special treatment. He was asking for consistency. Spurs fans saw it differently. They looked at Wembanyama and saw a young superstar being punished by perception because he is so tall, so long, and so different from everyone else. Even legal defense can look unfair. To them, Wemby was not crossing the line. He was simply using the gifts that make him special. That is why the debate exploded. Both sides had emotion, both sides had evidence, and both fan bases believed their star was being misunderstood. Then the analysts jumped in. Former players knew exactly why this moment felt real. They understood that playoff basketball is not always clean, calm, and polished. It is pressure, pride, physicality, and emotion. Sometimes the competition gets so intense that the post-game handshake is not enough to cool it down. But the league is watching too. When tunnel footage goes viral, the NBA cannot pretend nothing happened. Whether the response becomes a warning, a fine, or simply tighter control around Game 4, the message is clear. Everyone will be watching differently now. The officials will watch closer. The cameras will follow every interaction. The fans will study every stare, every bump, every word. And that may be the biggest consequence of all. Because Brunson and Wembanyama are no longer just two players in the series. They have become the emotional center of it. From this point forward, every drive Brunson takes into the paint will feel heavier. Every contest from Wemby will be judged harder. Every whistle, or every missing whistle, will carry the memory of that tunnel moment. That is how one viral clip can change an entire playoff series. Not because it decides the score, but because it changes the way everyone sees the battle. Game 4 just became a different kind of battle. Game 4 was already important. Now, it feels unavoidable. Because after the tunnel footage exploded across social media, this series stopped being only about basketball strategy. It became about response. About pride, about who would control the narrative when the lights got even brighter. The next time Jalen Brunson and Victor Wembanyama step onto the same floor, every camera in the building will know exactly where to point. Before tip-off, analysts will revisit the footage. During introductions, fans will be waiting for body language. During the first quarter, every collision between them will trigger reactions from the crowd. The game itself may look the same on paper, but emotionally, everything has changed. For Brunson, this is perhaps the biggest mental challenge of the entire postseason. He cannot afford to play angry because anger speeds you up. It makes you force shots. It makes you argue with officials instead of getting back on defense. It makes you chase revenge instead of chasing victories. The version of Brunson that New York needs is not the frustrated competitor from the tunnel. It is the calm assassin. The player who embraces contact without demanding sympathy. The player who takes the hit, gets up, and attacks again. The player who has built his reputation by turning disrespect into production. If Brunson channels this situation correctly, the controversy could fuel the best performance of his playoff run. But if emotion takes control, the moment could consume him. Then there is Wembanyama. This may be one of the most important moments of his young career because talent has never been the question. Size has never been the question. Potential has never been the question. The real question surrounding every generational superstar eventually becomes this: how do they handle handle pressure when basketball becomes emotional? Can they stay composed when opponents challenge them physically? Can they avoid trying to prove something on every possession? Can they continue making winning plays when the spotlight becomes uncomfortable? Game 4 gives Wemby an opportunity to answer all of those questions. He doesn't need to dominate every possession. He doesn't need to send a message. He simply needs to remain who he has been at his best. Passion, discipline, unselfish, devastating. Because the moment young stars start chasing narratives, they stop controlling games. The coaches understand this better than anyone. Tom Thibodeau knows his team feeds off Brunson's toughness, but toughness without discipline becomes chaos. The Spurs coaching staff understands that Wemby's greatest strength is his ability to impact the game without forcing it. Behind closed doors, the conversations this week probably sound less like tactical meetings and more like psychological preparation. Ignore the noise. Trust your habits. Do not let one moment define the next one. And then there are the officials. No group enters Game 4 under more pressure. Every whistle will be dissected. Every no call will be replayed. If Brunson drives and contact occurs, millions of viewers will immediately compare it to Game 3. If Wembanyama contests aggressively, people will search for evidence supporting whichever side they already believe. Fair or unfair, the officials are now part of the storyline. That is the hidden effect of viral moment. They don't just influence the players, they influence everyone around them. Perhaps the most fascinating part of all of this is what happens inside the locker room. Moments like these can divide teams, or they can unite them. Teammates often rally around a shared sense of injustice. Veterans remind younger players why emotional control matters. Leaders emerge louder. Roles become clear. Suddenly, preparation becomes personal. The Knicks may walk into Game 4 believing the world doubts them. The Spurs may walk in believing outsiders refuse to respect what they are building. And both mindsets can become powerful weapons. That's why Game 4 no longer feels like just another playoff game. It's a test of maturity, a test of leadership, a test of emotional intelligence under extraordinary pressure. Because the tunnel footage cannot be erased, the words cannot be unheard, the tension cannot be undone. The only thing left is the response. And sometimes, the response tells us more about greatness than the conflict itself. The basketball world wanted drama. Now, it wants answers. And Game 4 is where those answers begin. What this reveals about both stars, this moment revealed something important about both players. For Victor Wembanyama, it showed that he is not just a highlight machine or a future superstar protected by hype. He has edge, he has pride, he has the competitive fire that great players need when the playoffs stop being comfortable. Wemby could have walked away from the tension completely. Instead, he stood in the moment. That does not make him reckless. It shows that he understands the emotional reality of playoff basketball. Greatness is not always calm. Sometimes greatness has to be tested. For Jalen Brunson, the message was different but just as powerful. He reminded everyone why New York trusts him. Brunson is not the biggest player on the floor. He is not the flashiest. He does not win because he overwhelms people physically. He wins because he refuses to disappear. Against Wemby's length, against missed whistles, against pressure, against frustration, Brunson kept attacking. That is who he is, and that is why this matchup feels so real. Wembanyama is trying to prove the future belongs to him. Brunson is trying to prove the present still has to go through him. Neither player is raw. Neither player is the villain. They are simply two competitors standing at the same doorway, both believing they have earned the right to walk through it first. That is what makes this series special. Not the drama alone, not the viral clip alone, but the truth underneath it. Basketball at this level is emotional because it matters. It matters to players, cities, franchises, and fans who live every possession with them. And when Wemby and Brunson meet again, we will not just be watching a matchup. We will be watching two identities collide. The lesson behind the fire. In the end, this story is bigger than one tunnel video. It is about pressure. It is about pride. And it is about what happens when elite competitors are pushed to the edge without losing sight of the game itself. For Wembanyama, the lesson is control. His greatness will not only come from blocks, dunks, or impossible highlights, it will come from knowing when to respond, when to stay silent, and when to let his game speak louder than emotion. For Brunson, the lesson is balance. His fire is what made him special, but leadership also means turning frustration into focus. New York does not need him to win an argument. It needs him to win possessions. That is the human side of competition. The best players are not machines. They feel disrespect, they feel pressure, they feel anger, but the great ones learn how to carry those emotions without letting those emotions carry them. This series gave us drama, but it also gave us a reminder. Respect matters. Discipline matters. And even in the most intense battles, the goal should never be hate. It should be growth, because basketball is at its best when rivals push each other higher, not lower. Brunson and Wembanyama may never become friends on the court, but they can become better because of each other. That is what real competition does. It reveals weakness, sharpens strength, and forces greatness to mature under pressure. So as Game 4 approaches, the question is no longer just who wins. The real question is who responds with more wisdom, who stays composed, who leads better, who turns emotion into execution, and who understands that the loudest answer is not shouted in a tunnel. It is delivered on the floor. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to like the video, share it with another NBA fan, and subscribe for more deep stories behind the biggest moments in basketball. Now tell me in the comments. Comment 1 if you believe Brunson will respond with a monster game. Comment 2 if you believe Wembanyama will take control of the series. And comment 3 if you think this rivalry is just getting started. Because after everything we have seen, this story is far from over.